Welcome to this ACTFL webinar, Guiding Language Performance to the Next Level. My name is Paul Sandrock, Director of Education at the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, ACTFL. This webinar introduces you to the three-part series, Developing Learners' Performance, Aiming Toward Proficiency, which is available for purchase at our ACTFL website, www.actfl.org. In this overview webinar, the three presenters of our series will each provide an overview to the key content from their individual full-hour webinars. They'll be sharing ideas and examples. Our presenters are Arnold Bleicher, ACTFL Consultant, OPI Tester and Trainer in Ashland, Oregon, Stephanie Donau, University of Arkansas, Little Rock, and Fernando Rubio, University of Utah. This webinar will address two key questions. How does performance point toward proficiency, and what are some key elements that will help learners move from one level to the next? Our presenters will be providing you with ideas and strategies for ensuring that the instruction and assessment in each of the modes of communication is guiding learners to the next level of performance. And with this first slide, we start to explore that idea of performance pointing toward proficiency. Aiming toward proficiency. So in the foreground of this journey towards proficiency, it's very sharp, it's very clear, it's confined, very specific steps. This is the performance in my classroom as a teacher, daily lessons, my formative assessments. It's very confined and controlled. A bit further down the road, maybe about at that first bend, it's still related to what the learners have done day to day in this unit, and this is where my summative assessment at the unit level, an integrated performance assessment, I know what I've been doing day to day is leading to that point at the end of my unit. Farther out on the road, a little bit further down another bend, a little more summative where there's less control of the content and the context, it may be an outside assessment of that performance, like the ACTFL assessment of performance toward proficiency in languages, or APPLE. And far out on that horizon where I see those mountains, an unexpected point sometime in the future. I don't know exactly what it's going to be like, but I know that as I'm following this journey, at least I'm getting more and more prepared for those unexpected twists and turns of the journey. And will I be able to function there? That's where an oral proficiency interview, a writing proficiency test, will be that ultimate assessment of, with an uncontrolled content that I'm just entering into, can I really handle all that I should to be at a particular level? So informed by that goal, those proficiency levels in the distance, how do I ensure what I do today and throughout this whole unit will help my learners get there? So as we start to go down this journey, we want to remember that the proficiency levels and the performance I'm developing occurs in all these three modes of communication. And just a quick review, the interpersonal, where we're really focusing on negotiation and meaning, whether it's in a listening speaking conversation or text messages, reading and writing, or is it interpretive, where I'm really trying to show that I am able to interpret the message that's coming at me, whether I'm listening, reading, or viewing. And in presentational is about me as a speaker or a writer or someone visually representing, like in a PowerPoint. How am I creating a message that is effective in getting there to the people that comprise my audience? And the proficiency levels do consider all of these three modes of communication. So I want to think about how I can develop all three modes in my classroom instruction as well. And just a few guiding principles that all of us on this webinar have been talking about to get us started. It's really about how we get to the next level with these ideas in mind. First of all, that at any level, it's never going to be perfect. That cannot be the goal. Otherwise, I'll never leave a level. I'll never be able to get out of a level if I obsess so much about perfection. It's more about that degree of control that I have. And there are certain things that I will need to get some full control in a certain level, but be comfortable with partial control as I try to reach over into that next level. And part of the emphasis is also, as you see in the bullet points, what to focus on that will help me get to the next level. A lot of it has to do with that extending my description, being more specific. So the adjectives, the phrases, and even the more specific vocabulary that I use is one sign of rising to another level. In narration, it's again how I connect my ideas, my sentences longer and longer, and not just in length, but in the way that they are connected. At the novice level, I might just be using first, second, third, then next, and I get much more connected in my description and my narration as I move to higher levels. It's important also to make sure that we're using the language to accomplish the various functions. And so while I can ask someone to do something at a very simple level with a memorized question, that's only a beginning stage. To get to higher levels, there are more ways that I might ask that same kind of a question and accomplish that particular function. And then finally, the idea of using language more spontaneously, more independently, is definitely going to get me up to the next level. The more I control it, the more I'm only kind of protecting you in a cocoon, and once you get out into that far part of the horizon where the context is less controlled and the situation is less controlled, can I still handle it? That would be the true sign that I'm moving to the next level. Just a couple of more thoughts. Some of the things to consider as we move from level to level as far as the classroom strategies to help me get my learners across those levels. I have to think carefully about my strategies for error correction. And I think more and more as a teacher, I reflect back on how I tried to react as though it were just a normal communication, not a teacher-to-student communication, but in our day-to-day lives. When we don't just focus on correcting a form and quickly commenting on that, but we do it in a much more communicative way. We might restate or re-ask, oh, did you mean this? By saying that what the person was saying, giving an example of just saying it again with an emphasis, like you're going or your mother's going, I can't really tell. Trying to point out where the miscommunication or the lack of communication lies. The either-or questions also can help us focus on meaning by reflecting back to possibilities and the person, oh, this is what I really meant. And then also, I sometimes simply would, as a teacher, think about what are some meaningful, contextualized practice that I can do in the future, because there are some error patterns that are still pretty predominant in my class and that I want to focus on so that my students also start to focus on those and self-correct their own errors. Just a few strategies around error correction, something to keep in mind as you move from level to level. And the next area that we all agreed was very critical to move from level to level is that whole idea of the kinds of questions we ask. And bringing it back to the idea of the three modes of communication, you see in this slide some examples of how I need to make sure that my questions don't only rely on asking the simple yes-no types of questions in my interpersonal conversations. Don't just look at mere details in the interpretive, getting to the things that are not really meaningful in what I'm trying to understand that you read or listened to. And in my presentational tasks, making sure that the questions I ask of my students to help them create a better presentation, help them reflect more on who's the audience, what's the purpose, what's the message you're trying to get across, rather than is it this long, do you have 3 paragraphs, do you have 10 sentences, did you use this verb? Those are not the kinds of questions that are going to help me get to a higher level. It's really to push students to extend, to think beyond just the surface level. And of course, underneath all of this is the important caveat to make sure that we all maintain target language. The actual position statement is suggesting that at least 90% or more of both the students and the teacher's language and the input is all target language. So the idea is, without that kind of practice, how will we ever move forward? And that involves a lot of risk-taking, but that's how we grow to the next level. The more practice we get, when it's meaningful, when it's contextualized, when it's within a thematic focus, this really helps our learners to move forward onto a next level. If, as in that last point, we provide a certain amount of support. So sometimes it is simply giving, here are some phrases to help you enter into a conversation, to start to negotiate meaning, to start to ask for clarification. What are some of those phrases I would need? or in the interpersonal, instead of just standing in the middle of the room trying to have a conversation about something that I don't have much knowledge, what are the visuals? What's the text that I can use that would help me to start to react and provide some of the vocabulary that I need? Again, thinking more about how do we use language in everyday life in all of these three modes, and using that as a way to help build our learners' performance. So with that, we come to one of the key questions we want to ask is, well, if these are some general strategies, what's going to be more specific to really move out of novice into intermediate? Arnold, you're going to help us on this one.
Thank you, Paul. The journey we take our students on is a long and winding one. As language teachers, we have all experienced the joy of students gaining knowledge and applying that knowledge to communicate. Every step along the way, students exhibit more and more ability to interact in the target language. Our challenge is to continually motivate students to move from one level to the next. It's a journey that requires trust and well-planned strategies, implemented at the right time. Language teaching is more than a single methodology or a set of practices employed in the classroom. We are continually confronted with a series of complex decision-making. How do we respond to a student's language? What language are we hearing, and what are the implications? What do we need to do next? What level do we target? Which function do we ask for? How will our elicitation affect the response? Do we correct errors? If so, how and when? All of these decisions and how we respond to them are a critical component in our approach to teaching for proficiency. The actual proficiency scale with 5 levels of proficiency informs our expectations of each learner's performance. The 5 levels, as you see, are novice, intermediate, advanced, superior, and distinguished. The inverted pyramid represents how learners move through a given level and from one level to the next. As one moves up the scale, it takes longer to develop the functions and other criteria for the level and to move into the next higher level. For example, it takes longer to move from intermediate to advanced than to move from novice to intermediate, because the range of contexts and content areas, the complexity of language, and the expectations for accuracy increase exponentially. Nevertheless, the movement from novice to intermediate is a significant step. To determine the level of proficiency or performance that we use to measure against a set of criteria, and the first criterion is that of global tasks and functions. What can a student do with the language? Do they parrot? Do they create with the language? Do they narrate and describe or defend opinions? These are the global tasks and functions. And that is followed by the next criterion, which is content and context, in which the content and context in which the language takes place. In the webinar series, we'll discuss these contents as they apply to each level. The next criterion is accuracy and comprehensibility. Now, while grammar plays a role in this, and when I say accuracy, the first word that pops into our mind is grammar, but grammar plays a role, the question is really focused on who can understand the message. Each of the webinars presented will address the level-specific issues related to this piece of the puzzle. And the fourth criterion is text type. The text type, as you can imagine, each level has a text type associated with it, from words to extended discourse. Each webinar will specifically address all 4 criteria and relate them back to the level-specific requirements. Looking at the novice level, we ask ourselves, what can novice level learners do? How much language can they understand? How much language can they produce? What text type is expected? Who can understand the message? The novice level learner can produce and recognize language dealing with familiar context, for example, numbers, colors, and family. there's no single profile of the novice level, and if we look at what the novice can do, they produce words. They communicate, albeit minimally, through words, formulaic utterances, lists, phrases, possibly even a sentence. A novice level learner, when asked to tell about her family, may respond with a list of family members like mom, dad, sister, grandma, and grandpa. There is no single profile of the novice level. Rather, there's a wide range of performance within the level. Novice performance may range from isolated words to sentences. In the webinar, we will look at this range of performance and the implications. If you think of the digital media we're so used to today, the novice level is often that pixelated view. It's like if the TV freezes and the reception breaks up and you see these little images become squares and some even disappear. From these fragments, these bits and pieces, it's hard to see the details, but you can make out the general idea. Someone familiar with the context can fill in what's missing. That's the novice level speaker. A sympathetic listener, like a parent or teacher, fills in what's missing, and you can figure out what the novice level speaker is trying to say. Let's look at some examples of the kinds of language that would characterize novice level production. At the novice level, remember, it's telegraphic, it's short bursts, so it feels like this kind of a conversation. He has a car, red, a car, red. Tires are big. Tires is old, big, old, and many miles for people, and much noise. Now, that was difficult to understand and make sense of, even for a sympathetic listener. Typical of the novice level, that's what we're going to encounter. Eventually, communication happens, and there is some communication, but it takes a lot of effort on the part of the listener, not to mention on the part of the speaker. The intermediate level is where language learners begin to use the language to give personal meaning by creating with the language. Now, what does creating with the language mean, and how is that different from novice level language? In our webinar on moving from novice to intermediate, we will look deeper into the significance of creating with the language and what that means. The illustration tries to convey that the intermediate level learner is able to survive in predictable survival situations like asking for directions, getting food at a market or restaurant, making plans with a friend, and other simple interactions. Again, as we move up the scale of proficiency, the range of performance within the level is exponentially greater, and as with the novice, there's no single profile of the intermediate level. And in the webinar, we will look at the broad range of performance at the intermediate level and the issues that we will encounter as our students move from novice to intermediate. Now, looking at this slide, if we think back to the image of the novice, that's pixelated view, the intermediate is more of a slideshow, if you will. The images are fine, but we view one slide after another, individual sentences, individual details. They're strung together, communicating basic ideas in the here and now. And this moves then to the examples of what intermediate speech looks like. Remember the novice level, the telegraphic and short bursts. Compare that to the intermediate level handling of the same topic. The text being, let me tell you about my truck. It is red and very big. I like very much that it has big tires. The bad thing is that it is old. I don't like that it makes a lot of noise. Now, these are complete yet discrete sentences. There are no connections. Each sentence is one unto itself. There's no elaboration. It is creating with the language, but it's not a story, it's not narration. It's just a series of sentences on the same topic, but understood by a sympathetic listener.
Thanks, Arnold, very much. That really gave a clear view of what it takes to move out of novice into intermediate. I love the example of the truck picture, where I could see clearly how the novice was communicating but struggling, But I realize as a teacher, I have to let you struggle. I have to be conscious of how I respond to your errors, how I ask you questions that push you up to the next level to just add a little more detail, tell me a little bit more, all the while maintaining target language, so I can see how those strategies are definitely going to move learners from novice into intermediate. And I celebrate that now, even though it's not perfect, again, no level is perfection, but at least there's more complete communication, and the idea is a little more specific and exact. The vocabulary was more specific, not just having one word, car. Now I know, oh, this is really a truck, as one example. So, Stephanie, can you give us an idea of what are the signs of moving to the next level? How do we get from intermediate then into that advanced realm?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. Well, as you can see on the slide, as we look at the pyramid, you see the orange band of performance. That fades from the green into the orange, and the orange represents the advanced level of performance. And at the advanced level, it's very important to take a look at that little graphic there, because it introduces the idea of a storyteller. At the advanced level of performance, an individual may be able to tell a pretty full account of a story as it has occurred. As you see in the description there of the language that's expected, an advanced user of language can narrate and can describe in all the major time frames, and also handle a situation where there is an unexpected complication that may occur. So many times when people discuss the advanced level of performance and proficiency, as we're moving towards proficiency, we ask the question of what is a true narration? Well, it really needs to be thought of as in terms of a story that has a clear beginning, a full account, in a middle, and an ending that we can actually see as a storyteller might share with us. The performance that we find at the advanced level is described here in this band. And what's very important to keep in mind at the advanced level is we also create with language, just like we've done at the intermediate level. But as we're pointing more towards advanced level performance, we see that creation with language becomes more cohesive, more organized, and has more detail in order to give a fuller account of a story that the individual may be telling, or a description that has more details that we can actually see it. We can put a photograph in our mind of what's being described or told. Also, at this level, what's very important, as has been mentioned, is a situation with a complication. All of us know that in life we live our lives, we encounter other people. We have situations where things go very easily, but then in other situations, there may be an event that we don't expect. We lose our luggage. It doesn't arrive on time when we're flying. We may have an unexpected problem with our automobile. So these are those unexpected situations that an advanced level performer should be able to at least offer some alternative, create some situation that might be a possible way to get themselves out of a complicated situation. And also at this level, the production range of an advanced level performer would be where sentences are combined and they become paragraphs. We may have individual paragraphs all the way ranging up to performance of several paragraphs that have connectivity. Just as Arnold showed you the example of the red truck continues to be developed at the advanced stage. There's creation with language, but now we see more cohesion, more organization, and more detail. So you have examples such as the intermediate that we've already viewed, comparing that with the advanced level performance. The young man who comes to get my neighbor every morning has a red truck with a powerful engine and extra large tires. Probably because it's so old, the engine makes a dreadful noise, like thunder, and wakes up the whole neighborhood. Now, and you can see in this example, there's a lot more detail. There's more expression. There's more of a visual that we can see in our minds. There's more of a video effect. And that brings me to this slide that shows you where we had at the intermediate level snapshots that performers and speakers of the language, users of the language may demonstrate. Those strings of events in a few details turns into a much fuller story. that has a video effect. We can actually play that video. We can see the details. We can relate to it as we hear or read the material.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was really clear, and I really appreciated the idea, again, reflecting on that truck story, how you said that at the novice level, it's like I really needed that photograph to understand what the person was really saying and to be able to fill in the missing pieces. And at the advanced level, it's the description that created almost that photograph for me, and it gave more information even than was in the photograph. So that really helped me understand that depth of description, the connectivity, the full rich account at the advanced level. So Fernando, you're going to take us to that next level, and out of advanced into superior. What are the signs of moving to that level?
Thank you, Paul. So as you can see, when you look at the inverted pyramid, the superior level, the yellow colored level at the top, is huge. And in fact, there's a lot of language that one needs to be able to handle to reach the superior level. If I had to define the difference between the advanced and the superior, if you remember when we showed you the advanced level, the image that we used, that Stephanie used, was a reporter. That's the advanced speaker. It's a reporter, storyteller, someone who can tell you what's going on, give you lots of details, lots of elaboration. But they're still handling language at a very concrete level. They're talking about what's going on around them. They can tell you about what they did last summer, but they're handling language at a concrete level. The big jump that happens between the advanced and the superior level is that at the superior level, the speakers are able to handle language at a much more abstract level. They have the ability to handle language and to access communication and information on a wide range of topics that go from general or personal interest to specialized fields. And they can do so with the level of accuracy and sophistication that only educated native speakers achieve. In fact, not all native speakers get to the superior level. Because in fact, if you think about it, most of what we do in our real lives, we do at the advanced level we use language at the advanced level, and we only get to the superior level in specific circumstances. So we need superior level language, for example, in order to provide a well-structured argument or an opinion, or to handle counterfactual arguments, which are specific, specialized situations. So to me, the big jump that happens between advanced and superior is the ability to handle language at a much more abstract level and to handle a much wider range and variety of topics and contexts. So performance at the superior level, if you think about the criteria that we showed you at the beginning of this webinar, and you think of the functions and the context and content, accuracy, the text type, at the superior level, we expect learners to be able to deal with a variety of abstract and specialized topics at an academic and professional level of sophistication. We expect a level of accuracy that would allow language not to get in the way of communication. So when you're listening to or reading what a superior level speaker or writer has produced, you don't get distracted by the language. Your focus is always on the message that they convey, and of course there are no patterns of errors, and they have the ability to produce extended discourse, to construct hypotheses and support opinions. So going back to the topic of the car that we have used as a connecting line from novice to intermediate, then to advanced, and now to superior, if you think of what the language that the advanced speaker produced, again, the advanced speaker is describing, giving you details, giving you a well-organized paragraph with elaboration. But when you move to the superior level, and I wanted to go back to what Paul mentioned at the beginning, the importance of questioning and elicitation. When you move to the superior level, we as teachers have the responsibility to push students to produce at that higher level of abstraction and complexity. So we can't just ask our students to tell us about their car or tell us about their last road trip. We have to push them to a much higher level of sophistication. So if you look at the example that we have here of how a superior level speaker would handle the topic of transportation, you see what we mean. A superior level speaker would say something like, mass transportation should be an area of great concern for Americans, but a deeply rooted sense of individualism coupled with decades of urban planning that favors suburban living have resulted, so they have the ability to build a coherent and cohesive argument and handle it at an abstract level. They don't have to go down to the personal level and give you personal anecdotes to support their point of view or their story. So describing language proficiency across levels and using, again, the video metaphor that we've used before, at the advanced level, we told you that the speaker at that level gives you the full story and gives you details, descriptive and narrative details. At the superior level, you get the full-length feature in which you not only see the whole story, but you can also see why and how the story is relevant, what may be the implications of the story, what could have happened if the plot had taken a different turn, etc. So it's a well-thought-out plot, and it's professionally delivered, and it keeps the audience fully engaged. Again, language doesn't get in the way.
Thank you, Fernando, so much. That really, again, gave me a good sense of the teacher's role in all of this. And again, it's not that language is ever going to be 100% perfect, zero errors, but that important role of how does the teacher ask the right kinds of questions to keep that extension, to keep that risk-taking moving forward. So, Arnold, I'm going to ask you to take us we're going to go mode by mode now and kind of give us a sense of, starting with interpersonal, what are some things to focus on in that mode that would help move students up to a higher level?
Well, thanks, Paul. Show this slide. The representation that's coming up here, we're looking for students to grow their language in exponential terms from the novice into intermediate to advanced to superior. What we're looking for, and you'll see as the text comes up, that moving in from isolated words and phrases, discrete sentences, to strings, connected, single paragraphs, multiple paragraphs, and often then into the superior level into extended cogent discourse. Now, this representation shows the expanded text types characteristics of the different levels. Earlier, we briefly touched on the text type as one of the 4 criterion used to holistically determine proficiency levels. Now, text type is the first thing we hear or read when students produce language. While it's often a clue as to the possible level, it's important to listen or look below the flow of production and to consider the functions. What are they doing with the language, and which major level of proficiency is being sustained here? Now, remember, the novice is often using rehearsed language in the attempt to communicate a message, and as the learner gains more control of the language, she expands on what she can do with that language. The advanced moves into storytelling, the superior, as Fernando pointed out, into dealing with issues in concrete and abstract terms. And this graphic is one that I really like. Again, the movement up the scale requires expanding abilities in terms of functions. So from the novice, attempting to communicate basic information about him or herself, and we saw the text type associated with that, through the levels with exponentially expanding capabilities in using the language to express different ideas in an increasingly wider array of content.
Thanks, Arnold. That really also that illustration that we're looking at, I can see how both the quantity, the quality, the complexity of what I have to express continues to expand, and I'm thinking again the role of the teacher to make sure that those opportunities at that next level are done within a scaffolded, supported, well-directed way, so that the risk-taking is comfortable, that you're helping me reach to that next level within a controlled performance, and once I get more experience at that, I may then spontaneously and independently be able to do it on my own. So let's look at the interpretive mode, and Stephanie, if you could share a few thoughts on how we move to other levels, higher levels within this mode.
Certainly. As we all know, in many instances, we tend to focus a little bit more on moving proficiency in the interpersonal mode, but it's very important to also support our growth in our language in the interpretive mode as well as presentational. So this slide refers to the changes that occur as we grow in our performance in the interpretive mode. And so, for example, as you see there, authentic materials are a key component of helping our learners grow their proficiency. As we stated at the beginning, 90% of the target language is expected or should be used by both the teacher and the learner in the classroom. And of course, the use of authentic materials is a very natural, authentic, as it states, a very highly cultural mechanism that we can use in order to demonstrate target language in its natural use, so that our learners who are learning to read and to listen to the language have the best models that they can have access to. As we move to the intermediate level, of course, the idea being that authentic materials should be supported throughout the levels of proficiency. Things that we look at as moving from novice, looking at individual, perhaps are we in a marketplace, is this a newspaper ad, those sorts of text that they may be looking at, and we may be asking very simple questions of them to identify. At the intermediate level, we want them to develop more of an ability and interpretive and understanding of the key details that a text may have that may be involved in a listening task, a viewing activity, or in a reading of a text. As we move then further on to the advanced level, the idea is to not only be able to identify supporting details, key ideas and supporting details, but to then begin to start to make predictions, inferences, to expand beyond what is actually maybe written on the page or what they've heard in a particular audio segment or a video that they may have had exposure to. And so that they're now beginning to be a little bit more independent in their interpretation of what they encounter in this target language.
Thanks, Stephanie. This really makes world languages a key partner in literacy across the whole spectrum. Thank you. And Fernando, if you could give us a few thoughts on presentational. I think this is probably one of those important modes, especially at the superior level. How do we get there?
Sure, it is. And so when we start with the novice level, we think of the novice speaker as someone who has to rely on memorized material, and we may think, well, that limits your ability to present effectively. But remember that, as we say in the slide, they can always use visuals to support their message, and you can see a novice moving toward intermediate level when they start using memorized chunks of language and expressions to make their expressions more complex, and they start using more connecting words and adding more detail. So the example that we have here, a novice speaker or presenter in this case, who's moving to the next level would say something like, I like swimming because I like to exercise, for example, and they would be adding more detail and using more connecting words. And as they grow and move from intermediate to advanced, they will be doing basically the same thing, but in this case, they will be connecting ideas into paragraphs. They will be using more words that connect different sentences to form cohesive paragraphs. They would start using words that represent a timeline when they start doing narration. So they'll say, when I do this, then I do that, or because I do this, I do that, and at times I do this, but suddenly this happened. So they will, again, start adding more detail and more complexity as they move to the advanced level. And when they move from advanced to superior, what we want to see is the ability to present in extended discourse, the ability to engage into extended analysis, to present and support opinions, and convey cause and effect relationships.
Well, thank you. This has really been a wonderful overview to how we move from level to level. And what you've also been talking about very much is how the performance that we can support and is controlled in the environment of our classrooms, in our instructional settings, whatever they may be, really helps us move towards the proficiency out there in the real world. That as I think about what it takes to survive, to be the storyteller, to be that more abstract analyzer at the superior level in the real world, what can I do to move from the performance that's controlled in instruction and prepare my learners to be confident and comfortable in that real world of proficiency? I think a lot of what you all have been sharing is that whole learning environment as an important bridge between what goes on in the instruction and the assessment in instruction to that real world area of proficiency. That learning environment is such a critical bridge. And here I see students collaborating, working with some authentic materials they're pulling up on the internet, and really using language to accomplish a meaningful task. This overview is leading into our full webinar series, and we have here the dates of the live audience recording, but the beauty of the webinars is that they can actually be viewed anytime on your own schedule. The live audiences are on the dates that you see here, but any time that you want to use the webinars, they are yours during the time that you have purchased them. And I thank Arnold and Stephanie and Fernando both for preparing for today's overview and for the webinar series that is coming up. I'm very appreciative of their time. And to learn more ideas and specific strategies for developing learners' performance and aiming toward proficiency, just sign up for the full webinar series at www.actfl.org. I'm Paul Sandrock, ACTFL Director of Education, and I thank you for learning today with ACTFL, your provider of high-quality professional development focused on today's most important issues. Thank you.